early morning for some of you, it could be late night. I can see Jamie is in the dark. It's just a pleasure to actually see everyone and share some of my experience with all of you. And I think Natalie and Christine here in Wellington is actually running a very fantastic program. It cannot be a better timing at this time, having such a program empowering and supporting people around the globe. So I'm just like feeling pretty honored to be here and share with you guys. And I would like to share my slides. So let's do that now. So you can all see my screen. Okay. Okay, cool. Apparently, I can't quite share my screen at the same time looking at the chat. So it'll be Natalie's job to actually fill me with the questions if you do have any during the talk. So let's make this fairly informal. You can ask any questions anytime. And maybe Natalie, you can raise your hand if any good questions come up in between, and then I can just stop and have a look at them and answer them, yeah? Yeah, so today's topic I picked is Master the Self, Master Mentorship. That's what you've seen in advertising, but the last tagline is, if you can master yourself, you can master everything in your life. But first of all, let me do a little bit of introduction, right? Deep inside, or if I speak honestly, I'm a student of life, and I'm here only to share what I've learned. But of course, as humans, before we look inside to see who we really are, we dress ourselves with labels, and I'll do the same here. So to start with, I am an entrepreneur. I quit a comfortable job as a lead product manager, actually not very long ago, actually last year, when I met Natalie. I was still in my comfortable job. Since then, I started two fintech blockchain companies with my other co-founders. To now, more than half a year, 8 months now, we have grown the company from 3 people to now just over 20 across 3 different continents and 5 different cities, and raised comfortable seed round, now valued at about $10 million. And we're also selected into a UC Berkeley accelerator program out of hundreds of people in the world. But behind the scene though, it is a walk in the wilderness, right? In terms of running startups. All of the things that we've experienced that I would not have experienced if I was in a comfortable job. I think most of my time I spent in learning to be comfortable in uncomfortable environment. I think this is will be the same for any of you in any type of role. Some people will find this being or feeling alive by starting a company. Some people might go into the wild and ski, mountain skiing, or some will go on sailing, or some will, start a family and get married. They may look different from the outside, but the internal experience might feel somewhat similar, right? And my second label is advisor and guest lecturer. That's what I do occasionally for MBA students and also advise startups and individuals. And also, in terms of background, I was engineer by training, but not the type of engineer that built bridges. I was specialized in software. And later, I also got onto arguably a dark side of product management, and also gained my MBA degree from Otago University and Duke University from the US. And also, along the way, I have a passion for purpose-driven projects. Maybe deep down, I've talked to a lot of people about this. Maybe deep down, everyone's got the same bug. Obviously, Natalie has the same back here and with what she's doing here. And I run the human service social enterprise that help people expand their consciousness and also realize their full potential. And after all those labels, come back to, what's inside of me is all in all, what I do outside, what I experience outside is a reflection of my inner journey. I think you would agree with me on that one. If not yet, then let's see. And I'm also a meditator. That shouldn't be a surprise when we talk about self-mastery. And I study engineering of inner experience. Yeah. Even I work in tech. We as humans seem to be more interested in studying engineering and engineering things that's outside of us. I can honestly say that even for today, with all the advanced technologies, none of the technology, machine learning, AI, you piece everything together, none of the technology is as advanced as this technology here, right? If we can master this one, then we are capable of doing anything. But it seems that we rarely look inside and understand the inner workings of ourselves. So I just passionately develop self-knowledge and mastery the piece of technology. And at the same time, I share some of those knowledge with people. And as for today, my agenda is quite short. So there's only like 2 topics. I'm going to just give a little bit of COVID-19 perspective, but not like from an expert perspective. I'm not a health expert or anything, but more of like giving a little bit from working in the front line in the business world, but also probably more so from a personal perspective, how we react to this big shock, not just to economy, but also to individual lives. Then I think that will actually lead very nicely into, as an individual, how we hopefully not just react, but rather act upon this circumstances. And then, and then probably talk a little bit about how that might impact you. I think everyone here will have an intrinsic interest in self-development and also mentorship, things like that. And then in the end, hopefully I can leave enough time for Q&As. So yeah, so let's get into it. The first thing I want to raise is perspective. I think everyone has probably heard of this saying, life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we react to it, right? I think COVID-19 is that 10% that happened on us. The overwhelming majority of the outcome of COVID-19, though, is actually on us as individual, but of course, collectively as a whole. And the view of that, shifting the view from the outside to inside, or from different ways of looking at the same thing, is what we call perspective. And this determines how you see the world, things happening around us, and how we would act to things. So if we do pay attention, or we are a bit of self-aware, or at least conscious to some degree, I think we would realize that this might be a universal truth. I don't know. You can reflect it. As how we do one thing is how we do everything. Yeah. This is almost true for, or maybe actually very true for anyone under any circumstances. And if we look around or look back, we could complain our bosses is an asshole. Can I say that on video? The company doesn't recognize our talent, doesn't promote us. The economy is shit. The virus is cursed upon us. The government is making our lives miserable. Yeah. So we could do all of those things, but complain, hate, antagony, a feeling of lack, fear will only take us to a worse place than what has happened, right? A lot of times, like emotions, negativity clouds our judgment, and also blocks our fountain of love and energy, let alone, passion and compassion to other people. And what I'm really saying is, everything happened around us whatever happened is actually on us, right? Our happiness, our success, how effective the mentoring session would be, it's actually on us. We are that responsible, and at the same time, if we recognize that, we are that powerful, right? So I would give you an example. I talk a lot about this type of comparisons from individuals to organizations to industries. So if you actually take a look at maybe yourself to start with, but I kind of assume everyone here would have somewhat a growth mindset, right? So let's say as an individual person, you do have a growth mindset. If you don't, that you turn into the example that I fall back to is you do complain a lot about your surroundings, and you couldn't see yourself really, and that will also be a point of where we can be aware and then start working on those things. And if we move from there, if we are a person with growth mindset, right, then quite often we are in an organization. Yeah, it doesn't matter what type of organization it is. We are in an organization, and we also need to keep a higher awareness of what is happening inside of us, but as well as how we interact with this environment. So in an organization, the collective consciousness of the organization usually reflected in culture, performance, market positions, and everything that you can see visible, right? But that is actually rooted from the collective consciousness of individuals in the company. Some may have larger impact, like the CEO. Some may have smaller impact, but nevertheless, it's a collective consciousness. This is usually the ceiling of your growth. That's why perspective is important. If you recognize that there's still room to grow, then you will suck it up and keep growing, yeah, until you hit the ceiling. Once that ceiling is hit or you're very near to the limit, if you are also conscious, then you will realize there will be organizations or other opportunities in the next level with higher consciousness be calling you, right? So you get ready. And that's only within one organization. I think everyone can reflect on, their job or, even family or anything else that they can think about. But after that point, though, an organization doesn't exist by itself, right? If the organization is doing okay, it seems to have pretty good sort of culture or values, everything else. But the industry is a sunset industry, which means usually that actually means the industry as a whole has a ceiling to its collective consciousness, right? It hasn't evolved as much. It hasn't break its own mold or pattern as much. So if looking back in my old days, I don't know, most of you may have experienced the last 10 years of enterprise software, right? That was gold in the old days, maybe 20 years now. High-paid consultants travel around the world, namely companies like SAP, Oracle's, those type of companies. I was one of them. Yeah, I was a consultant in those companies back then. It was pretty good days, but you can actually see, well, catch 2020, right? If you look back, you may be able to see the Web 2.0 is coming. It's disrupting. Now we are very familiar with and accustomed to software as a service, subscription model, consumption anytime, anywhere, by anyone. But so that is a contrast, right? It doesn't matter how well your organization is doing. You got to have a higher or larger perspective on disruptions. So that could be social disruptions, right? Like Uber, like people are okay now sit in a stranger's car, or technological disruptions, right? Some things you couldn't do before, now it's easily you can stream online like Netflix, and also regulatory disruptions and a bunch of different type of disruptions that mostly led by people breaking their mindset to start with, and that forces a set of actions, and then people make things happen and disrupt the old mode. And I'm experiencing one myself right now, right? Talking about the past is cool, but if you talk about right now, see if you can see that we are moving from Web 2.0. So that is in the names of like Facebook, Twitter, that sort of social media, now into Web 3.0. right? In the 2.0 world, companies exploit users' data for significant financial gain without sharing any of that, right? And inherently, the model guarantees winner takes all. That kills most innovations and smaller players in the market. And of course, I will go into the industry that I work in. Is blockchain technology is one of those tech breaking this downward spiral and disrupting the world. And alongside with it is cryptocurrency, especially now, COVID-19, people realize fiat US dollars can be printed freely without limit. That is kind of scary, but also a huge wake-up call, right? And then you would appreciate a fixed supply, deflationary store value like Bitcoin. Maybe you don't buy them, but you start realizing your mind start to change and become malleable to see the other side of the world. Of course, when I talk about this, I'm passionate, right? Because I'm in it. But this is not a talk about tech, and it doesn't actually matter whether it's blockchain or AI or whatever the name you give that piece of technology or disruption. Disruption is, in a sense, about breaking old mindset. Yeah, and that is you do that to an industry, but actually you do it to individuals so that you can bring the movement or changes to the world. And blockchain or any of the tech that we talk about may not be the end game, but who cares? The most important thing, I think, is now, if we haven't realized it, we should realize it is about changing of our mindset. Yeah, and the word of mindset is kind of a catch-22 as well, because once you have your mindset, doesn't matter how expensive it becomes, there's always boundaries. So the trick of self-mastery is to, on one side, keep expanding your mindset, but at the same time, understand that there's also boundaries to it, so you don't fall into trap that you know everything. And that's sort of a intrinsic guarantee that you will keep growing and keep learning until you reach a point of infinity or unlimited wisdom. And that's where you will realize the power really comes within, as well as the wisdom. And going to the last one, right, Black Swan, I think this is very timely because COVID-19 is this Black Swan. Black Swan is something that just happened, all of a sudden. It breaks everything. It disrupts everything with a collapsed timeline. Yeah, disruption happens maybe over a decade, 20 years time span, but a black swan would disrupt any industry within a split second. We see that in a week when New Zealand got locked down, and also we see that in a short time frame of merely a couple of weeks around the world, how economy changes and how people's lives changes, right? So it challenges everyone, every organization, of course, and also every country, mostly for their fundamental values. So this will be like, is life more important or is economy more important? Do we save lives or do we save jobs? And also, this reviews who we really are. Yeah. Because anyone who hesitate or unsure who they really are will pay the price. I think each country, each leader, reaction now reveals so much of it, right? And also at an individual level as well. Are we focusing on getting the last roll of toilet paper from supermarket, or still have some, kindness and real love and kindness to share that with other people? I think love and kindness and real humanity actually shows color when things are hard. When things are easy, it's easy to just give a little bit more of what you have. But when you don't have much and we can still give, that's the time that we show character. And this doesn't, you can't actually just have character, it's built. And also you got to discover that. And I think we can also quite easily fall into a reactive mode and survival mode under such circumstances. And in the previous few levels, at the individual level, organization and industry level, every time disruption comes, you can be reactive. You can just survive. You can be just pushed by the tide behind you. You can barely get by. I think you can still do that. However, in a black swan event, it will be very difficult, if not impossible, if you are still very reactive and think about survival rather than something else, right? Like beyond the current consciousness level. And this is time, I think we actually need to know ourselves a little bit more. Like sometimes when we are reactive and very emotional, it's hard to have that stillness or a little bliss inside of us so that we can come down in a chaotic environment and start realizing, we are actually capable and what are our qualities as an individual, not sometimes we confuse about our contribution, our value with the organization's value as a whole, right? If we put ourselves outside of the platform, what is our intrinsic human value? What can we contribute? And who can we serve? And how can we actually offer to other people, right? So you can actually see some company doing that, and that's because the people in the company, they realize that some companies, they repurpose their production line to produce PPE and support all the people around the world, and some of the companies do dramatic shifts within a couple of weeks to actually help out in the situation, right? If you don't know yourself really well, you can't actually do that quickly and that well. And as an individual, I'm sure like a lot of people are going to struggle. And for example, office receptionist, right? Not to actually judge the role itself, but this type of role would get hurt. Not specific role, but it's more of if our entire value can only distribute it physically to a specific organization and is not transferable, and it's gonna suffer, right? And this is a really good time where we can actually reset and reevaluate ourselves, because even in a role of a receptionist, a lot of work we do have intrinsic value. For example, connecting people, right? And knowing the person that you're connecting to, and then helping them to find the right people to talk to. A lot of the looks like mundane or technical work that we do have a lot of intrinsic value behind it if we actually put our heart in what we are doing and love what we're doing, right? And this is also a time to reposition ourselves. So yeah, so at this point I will ask a question, is not a trick question, right? So who lead digital transformation in your organization? Is it the CEO? Is it the CTO? Or is it coronavirus? I mean, I gave two examples here. I won't go into very much detail because once you look at the brand, you know what I'm going to say. But deep down, though, we actually know what works and what doesn't. Before WeWorks collapse, we already know, this type of organization may not scale, and then the way that they conduct themselves may not last very long. But we're often delusioned and by misguided signals because they receive large investments from reputable companies, and they seem to do very well. And then so we accept the fact that they are fine. But you see, Black Swan is usually disrupting a way that you can't hide. Yeah, the real you, including what the company really doing, you cannot hide. And I think if we look at ourselves are the same. But I guess two things I would do if I were in this situation is be able to help myself, is developing, obviously is like, we talk a lot about perspectives. One is like developing that perspective and insight into the ever-changing environment. Beyond the ever-changing environment is the perspective of things, and that comes from a stillness inside. And this skill I called self-engineering. So knowing ourselves and our relationships with our surrounding environment, so we have better insights and also foresights of things. And then the second skill I would say is to get help. And obviously, mentorship is a good place to start. But again, you cannot rely on mentor to solve all your problems. We are ultimately responsible, but we can ask for help, right? And this help is asking for help for ourselves. But at the same time, you can also ask for help from people outside of your bubble, right? And this slide, you don't need to look into the details. What I want to convey here is a lot of times when we are in life, um, we tend to feel or tend to hope the world is developed as a straight line. We start somewhere, and then if we keep working very hard, and then eventually we get to our goal, right? But life is probably more like the pictures on the right-hand side. It's always chaotic. And I think a lot of a female audience here, I think men at this day and age are the same, is we juggle multiple things like career, relationship, with various people like parents, partners, kids. There's also wealth, there's health, there's like, is my life meaningful? You know, we juggle so many things. But if we do the two things that I suggested, is like help ourselves via self-engineering and also get help. Maybe you don't, most likely you won't solve the problems immediately. They are not pills, right? And there's no pills exist anyway, so they won't solve your problems immediately, but you get a clearer picture of life. Once you have perspective, you kind of know what sort of tools you need, what sort of skills you need to develop, and which hole you need to come out of, right? This is more like on the bottom right hand side graph is, you know, life is about ups and downs. Yeah, you can never get to a state that you just stay there and it's there forever, even though we, you know, secretly all hope that's the case. And quite often, you know, the ups is very momentary. Well, at least it feels very momentary. And then the down seems forever. That's usually, you know, psychologically, that's how we feel. And then a author that I really like, Ryan Holiday, I don't know if you read his books, he said, obstacle in the way becomes the way. That's pretty profound. Yeah, like all the trolls in our life, they are our life. They make who we are, right? It is those trolls like you know, like breakups, laid offs, companies folded, divorces, lots of heartbreaks. If we learn those lessons that's meant to give us through those challenges, we develop our character and we actually find out who we really are after those challenges. And every time we come out, there's greatness. I'm sure you've experienced this, right? I'm sure. You can take a moment now, like there's probably flash memory come up. You can think about, you know, an event almost kill you, or most painful and most memorable to you. How do you feel about it now? Yeah, you could have buried it and also buried the lessons with it, right? But I'm sure for the ones that you've gained lessons from and you've got over it, I'm sure you feel stronger surviving it. And a lot of things, a lot of times, if we are emotionally attached, we cannot be still. Like inside, we cannot be still, and outside we can pretend to be still, but inside you can't pretend. We will feel angry, upset, antagonized, and those are like clouds. Yeah, and those clouds will cloud what we talk about the whole time is perspective, and perspective is what we need to gain so that we, you know, how to proceed with our lives and ourselves. And this is where also, you know, mentors, coaches can help you to see through things, right? I'll talk a little bit about how we approach, you know, mentorship as well, because that's quite important. How effective it turn out in terms of mentorship. Um, so it's all about self mastery, and I won't go into details of, you know, the figures here, and it's not that important anyway, because we all know this. We've experienced this. This is more of like an engineer structured way of putting things. We evolve from a state of reactive that's usually involve negative emotions, and gradually we are able to see ourselves as who we are, so we become neutralized, and then gradually we actually inspired, empowered our inner energy and wisdom that come out of selves, and that's usually reflect as more peace, more calm, and a more loving and giving, and that will actually as a reciprocal cycle that what we give is what we receive, right? But that is a evolution inside of selves that helps us through that process. But a lot of those people will give them different names. It doesn't actually matter what you call them, as long as you understand this is what's happening inside of cells. And this is usually what we also call vibes, yeah, a vibration of a person. This is what a reflection of often untold inner being. So who we really are and how we really feeling inside will reflect as vibes that affects our relationship. Because I'm sure you know when you first meet someone and when you talk to them, are you affected by them, or they kind of have that kind of vibe that you just like, when is the conversation is going to finish? And a lot of these are untold cues. We don't usually analyze them because they just come and we just know. And I noticed this actually quite well in any situation, because I've gone through like my fundraising experience not too long ago. I met a lot of VCs. You thought it's all business conduct, right? You thought it was like pitches and you gave presentations, all objective, right? But not really, you know. Even fundraising, this world is all about people. You can't actually cheat, like who you really are authentically. People can actually sense. And whether you have fabricated your image or identity, or whether you can actually show who you are, and your perception of the world and your value actually shows in those interactions. And a lot of times the good VCs, I'm sure good bosses, good people, they actually look at those characters. They may not care as much your particular engineering skill or particular skills is not sufficient, because if you have those self-developed, they know you can always learn those hard skills outside, right? And also quite often is most self-development courses would focus on specific skill development, right? Time management, etc. But if you are like me, engineering background, you would like to go down to first principles of self-engineering. And it is about raising your vibration, right? So if you see the chart on the right, it's about raising your vibration and expanding your consciousness, so you can actually take on more things, but still be keeping a balance within inside of yourself. And at the same time, you could actually discover more talent and more wisdom inside, than keep looking outside and finding comfort, finding security, finding dependencies outside of yourself, which are always changing. So you can never find security. You can never find permanent safety if you only rely on things outside of yourself. And the two tools I use personally is self-engineering or inner engineering. And the second one is meditation, right? And they go hand in hand. If you only do one, not the other, doesn't matter you do which one, the result will be limited. Yeah. If you keep growing your consciousness through inner engineering, if you don't do meditation, then you will find a lot of boundaries, because our mind, a lot of times through our past experience, our education, our environment, it's kind of fixed. And then mind is something that's inside ourselves and we can't see. And it's quite hard to re-engineer it without a technique like meditation. You might have experienced like other techniques, right? But it doesn't matter, it's meditation, mindfulness, a lot of these tools is there to actually help us to really make our mind malleable. Once you are malleable, you are open, then this is a point where consciousness start to expand itself, and you start to connect the real you inside. And yeah, so do I have more to talk about here?
Do you mind if we open it up for some questions on this topic?
Oh, sure.
Is that all right? Anyone has any questions? If you have a question, just remember to unmute yourself. Actually, maybe I have a question, Betty. Which one did you? Sure. How did you? What was the first your first introduction to the concept of self-mastery? Was it the inner engineering piece or the meditation piece, or how did you first get introduced to this practice?
Mindset. So so what I call now inner engineering part of it. Yeah. before we actually enter, I think everyone will have a different point that triggers them to look inside of themselves. I remember I read a book 5 or 6, maybe 6 years ago. It's called 7 Years is a Life. Yeah. So it's like a person, if you look at his cells, right? Like the cells regenerate, and physically you become a new person every now and then. But this book is talking about every 7 years, if your mindset change and how you think, how you act changes, 7 years later, if you look back, you're a completely different person. So now it's been 6 years since I read this book. I'm completely different. So it's true.
Does anyone else have any questions at this point? Okay, should we go on to the next slide?
Sure. Just a couple more words on the self-mastery, right? I think we all know the answers. I'm not here to tell you the answers. You will roll your eyeballs, right? But it's actually true. We all have like the wisdoms and power we need. And I remember back in the days when I worked in corporate, we would get those first-tier consultants to come in and evaluate our company. But do I not know? They know nothing about my company. They know nothing about what we do, right? Of course, no one knows better than ourselves what our problems are. But we are not still. We're not Zen, and we cannot see through the cloud to the truth. And this is a time, a mentor will be helpful, right? A mentor is more like a mirror. So that's a good analogy, I think. A mentor is more like a mirror. A mentor doesn't solve your problems. It's like consultants. They don't solve my problem. They're like a mirror. So if we can look into the mirror and see ourselves, then we understand ourselves and our problems. And that's a point the problem will start get resolved very easily. And at the same time, we need to actually be utterly honest and truthful to ourselves when we do this exercise. Everything that you hide. So for example, if you put makeups on and then have a lot of mascaras on, and if you look in the mirror, you can't see it, can you? So you have to be naked in front of a mirror to actually see who you really are. And the same way, it depends on how much you want it, right? Depends on how much you want to grow and how much you want to see the real you. You do the same to your mentor. And all they do is like a mirror, reflect back the reality and telling you the truth and the real problem that you have. And a good mentor usually asks good questions, and we will know the answer when we hear them, and we know how to solve them best ourselves. So that's just extra words on mentorship. And also for self-engineering, there's not much I can actually lecture because whatever I say or anything I say, at best it becomes inspiration. At worst, it's just another concept or idea that you feed into your already probably pretty fed up brain and serve no purpose. And the best time the self-engineering should be invoked is when you face life challenges, big or small. Big as could be, all those memorable events that you had before. Small could be an interaction with somebody or a task that triggers your emotion. Yeah, that could be dramatic and could be as subtle as one emotional that you have, especially like negative emotions. And that is the point where you can use that as anchor to actually start gaining some insight of yourself and try to understand why that actually comes up and how they actually works. And whether it's coming from a fear or a place of lack, or maybe it traces back to far back of our history. But that's up to you to actually figure out the lesson. That's most important. What is the lesson that this particular event or emotion that's bring to me, and that's the place to improve, right? And this, you can do it yourself. You can also do it with a mentor, right? Yes.
I have it. Do you have some questions that you ask yourself, or any practice that helps you to, when you feel that emotion, that helps you to realize it or unpack it?
Yeah, I think the hardest part is actually aware. So usually is like, I got angry, and then I'll just like react. And then after that, I will use some superficial ways to calm myself down, like have a coffee and then, put my leg up and read a book. But that's all covering up. So the first thing is, if you think this is useful, then, well, you try it, right? So just every time you just tell yourself, oh, I have a negative emotion, or this doesn't feel right. What does it mean? If you start asking, what does it mean? And then start asking a number of whys. Why do I get angry? Then you might say, because that person is so mean. And then you will say, why do I feel hurt if that person is mean? If you keep going down the rabbit hole, then you start to see our focus start shifting from that person is an S to, oh, this is the part of me that's not complete yet. And this is the part I could work on. This is a mindset shift as well. Is important to actually know that this world is not forced upon us to make us miserable. This world happen around us is like a movie scene, so that we can learn our lesson. And those players, like those actors out there, they're doing their best in their role. Like they could be they could play a bad role, right? But they're not a bad person. So they play that role so that we can get angry, or they could hurt us like on the surface, so we can learn our lesson and we become whole and complete. And that is the sort of perspective that we actually kind of need to learn to shift. And you also gradually learn to gain trust of this perspective as you do this exercise, because every time you do it, you realize, shit, life becomes better, even though it looks miserable before. And you start trusting this process, and you start gaining more confidence by doing it. And what I'm saying here is more of like a little light to share with you. And then if you think that seems interesting and you start actually practicing and doing it, then you gain confidence yourself. There's no point somebody else is telling you what to do. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, it really did. And it made me think about just some things in the context of mentorship, how so with my mentor, sometimes the things that I show up and share are the easier things to address. And I'm just thinking about maybe some of the, the harder, deeper things, that point about becoming really conscious of them, and then bringing them to the table, the conversation, to your awareness, is really valuable and interesting to think about, and action.
Yeah. And that's usually the goal.
The obstacle is the way.
I think I also had a note on the side of the mentor. If someone doesn't have yet maybe the awareness to ask themselves those whys, being the mirror and asking them those questions as to why they're feeling the way that they are, or why they're not acting on their actions or something like that. I find that interesting from the mentor perspective as well as the mentee.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're spot on. That's why I say mastering the self is mastering everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great.
Shall we move on to the best part?
Yes, we shall.
So the self-engineering part is how to lecture, but then the meditation is something that we can get our hands dirty today. And as I said, this goes hand in hand with self-engineering. It weakens the ego to start with, and it naturally actually expands our consciousness and make our brain more malleable, and also improve stillness. So you become calm in almost any situation if you practice it regularly. And that's a good way for you to see the perspective and the truth of our problems. I don't know if I need to actually justify meditation these days. I think a lot of science, neuroscience, have great and hard evidence on benefits of meditation. So I listed 3 here. One is stress, right? So stress contributed to 90% of hospital visits. Do you know that? And it's actually termed as a new epidemic of the 21st century, stress. And meditation is proven to reduce stress, increase productivity. And that's why it's so popular in tech startups in Silicon Valley, now also Fortune 500 companies, right? And 75% people already practice meditation before. So I'll just save all the explanation then. The second biggest benefit is like balance your left brain and right brain without going into details. There's a lot of the neuroscience proofs on how that's happened. Maybe in when we have more time in the future, I can show a little bit more of that. It's pretty interesting science. And regarding the expanding of consciousness part is, we can conceptually understand this. Yeah, I talk about vibe and consciousness. It's easy to conceptually, intellectually understand it, but this type of things is not a knowledge. It's not a hard skill that we apply like 1 + 1 = 2 type of knowledge. It is an experienced skill that you have to do it through practices. Like meditation is one way. This will raise our self-awareness. Right? Once we are still inside, then our awareness will raise up. And also it provides a heightened perspective and empowers us to grow quite naturally through the practice as well. And I've also put 3 names at the bottom, and these are the 3 elements that I usually teach as mindfulness, meditation, and manifestation. There are 3 very different things, right? They may look very similar, even the forms may look similar, but deep down they're very, very different. And the meditation part is the most important and crucial of all of us to really connect to our inner wisdom, be still, and expand consciousness. Whereas the mindfulness is more of helping us to relax in the right now. Usually that's through breathing techniques, keeping our focus on some stuff on our body. Most of the apps out there, it's more leaned towards mindfulness. This is all new and scientifically proven which part of the brain, when you do mindfulness, it lights up. And when you do meditation, the whole brain lights up. So there's a very distinct difference between the two from a scientific point of view, but also from, sort of self-development point of view. So mindfulness manifestation is more of a teaser, right? Whereas meditation is the crust of it, which we'll practice a little bit today, okay? So I think we can get into it quite easily. For the meditation, I'll do a simplified version. It is so we will use some mantra. So mantra is like a mind vehicle. If like majority of you, if you have practiced it, different people will use different mantra, and it just helps us to get into the right state of being. Usually involve very beautiful words and to help us initiate our meditation experience. So I think we can just get started into a meditation session if no one have any more questions.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. So let's see if we can do this. So I've learned this meditation. So I've practiced meditation for a long time, but then this particular meditation portion of it, I learned from a very enlightened Japanese guru. And it's quite cool. So, and I'll play a music, right? See if you can actually hear it. Can you hear the music come out?
No, can't hear it.
Can you all hear the music?
No, we can't hear it.
Oh.
If you play, do you have your phone nearby?
It should work if I play it from here. Is it coming out?
No. Yes, now it is.
Now it is?
Now it is.
Okay, we're in business. Okay. Let me restart this. Okay, so firstly, sit up in where you are. If you lie down in your couch or in your bed, please just sit up. We'll do this just for a few minutes, and don't worry about the time, and I will keep the time from my side. And so just sit up comfortably in where you are. You don't need a particular posture. You just sit comfortably, put your hands on just your legs, relax and close your eyes. And now turn the music up. And this will be a guided meditation. So just close your eyes. Don't need to open it to look or anything. And just follow my guide into the meditation. Okay, so one thing about posture is you need to sit upright, erect. Your back needs to be erect, so keep your back straight. And do not lean on the back of the seat. So firstly, we do a simple mindfulness practice with some breathing techniques. This is to help us to quiet down with quite an exciting presentation this morning or evening. So it can help us to ease into meditation later. So the breathing technique is very simple. So it's fast breathing in and slow breathing out. So a simple trick is you breathe in and count 2. And then you breathe out and count 4. Breathe in through your nose and then breathe out through your mouth. So we just do this a few times. So breathe in through your nose and then breathe out through your mouth. And gently put your awareness on the breath itself. If you can keep a focus on the breath, and then you won't focus on what's already happened, and you also won't worry about what is going to happen in the next hour or 2 or in the future. So you're more present. There's no past, no future, it's just present. So once you get used to this, you can extend the breath to count, breathing through nose for 3 seconds, and then breathe out through your mouth for 6. If you can't quite follow the count, it doesn't matter. It just keeps the breath in slightly shorter than the breath out. Right? Take a quick breath in and then an elongated breath out. Just feel the air that you breathe in as beautiful oxygens that gives all your cells, all your organs, those needed oxygen. And then gradually breathe it out and then empty your lung, empty all the negative emotions, all the negative energies and everything that's inside, just breathe it out. And the energy is also whole. And just feel every breath that you take, you become more relaxed into where you are. You become more present. And next, we'll move into meditation. That's a deeper state of our consciousness, where we can really connect to ourselves, connect to our inner wisdom, the fountain of love inside of us, and also the power inside. So in the meditation, now move your awareness, your consciousness, or your focus gently onto your forehead. So gently put your awareness at your forehead. If you can, imagine a white light or a light bulb at your forehead. If you can. If you can't, it doesn't matter. Just gently put your awareness at your forehead. And I will start to say a few mantras. So these mantras are giving us as a mind vehicle to give us some beautiful high energy words to help us get into the state that we want in this meditation. Okay. You can also follow me and don't need to say it out loud, just follow it and say inside yourself. I am infinite love. I am infinite power. I am infinite wisdom. So through this meditation, let us all connect to our inner love, inner wisdom, and inner power. So we start realizing who we really are. And now just reset back to your forehead. Put your awareness at your forehead. And just quietly go into a meditative state. Okay, gently bring your awareness back, and just before you open your eyes, be grateful to someone that you want to be grateful for. Yeah, or just be grateful to life. And then gently open your eyes and back to this world. It's pretty easy, yeah? Pretty easy. I don't know how you feel. A lot of you have already done meditation before, so this shouldn't be a very new experience.
Wonderful.
And I have to disclaim that this is only a sample of what the real meditation is. And it can be very powerful to individuals' experience, depends on what life state you are in. And also a word on the self-engineering. Natalie asked, are there any actual techniques or tools that people can use? There's a toolbox that I can share, but usually it becomes very overwhelming. So it will be like 100 things that you can do this, you can write a diary, you can do this practice. So it's usually more effective at an individual or the small group level that some tools are shared and people start practicing, depends on their current life status. So yes, there are toolkits that you can use, but it's not very effective in a lecturing form. It's more of a live interaction form, but more effective. Same as meditation. We can all talk about it, but if we don't do it, we don't actually know the benefit.
Victoria
so
sorry, we just had a comment. Victoria said, that's delicious, thank you.
Thank you. That actually concludes. Oops. How do I remove the poll from my screen? Can you actually see the poll?
No,
it's
gone from my screen. Can you exit?
Oh.
It popped up for me and I just click exit, I think, yeah. Or it just went away. Joy says it's gone from hers.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. I saw it.
Cool.
Right. So that actually concludes the talk. And at the end, I just have something to offer. I felt that what Natalie and Christina are doing are really great stuff, like very empowering stuff. At a side, I also help a lot of people for self-engineering and meditation. And so far, I've done a lot of this type of talks and also guided meditation courses around the world, but mainly for the Chinese community, just because I see a lot of them do not have access to a lot of these tools. I think we are more lucky here, I think in New Zealand or around the globe, that have free access to a lot of these tools. But at the same time, I can also see a lot of noise. Just as what I mentioned, in the self-development skills, you can learn a lot of superficial things, but never get to the crust, like the first principle of it. So if you do think you want to learn a little bit more or want to go into a bit more depth or do a group meditation, I'm actually offering this private Facebook group, like free access to all of you. And then depends on what you want, and we can run regular group meditation sessions and also sharing some self-engineering techniques, etc. So so feel free. Maybe I'll just pop that in the chat later. And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Twitter, but Twitter is only for crypto stuff. So be aware.
We can share your details after the call too, so people can
Cool.
find info. And thank you so much for that offer, because you're right. It really is the practice where you get the value.
Yeah. Well, now I think I will stop sharing and then open to questions, or just people like freely share what they want to share, maybe.
There's a couple of people that have said thank you very much. Thanks for introducing them back to the practice of meditation.
Thank you for having me.
Does anyone want to share their experiences or ask questions? I'll stop recording now.